Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Incident Response webinar. My name is Mara Kadeemer, a Marketing Coordinator here at Action Associates. Let me introduce you to our presenters today. Mike Kaufman, the VP of our Managed Infrastructure and Cloud Services Division, Craig Sobleski, our CTO, and Jesse Thomas, our Managing Consultant of Data Center and Security Solutions Architect. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the gentleman to get going.
Thank you so much, Mars. Appreciate that. Hey, and welcome everybody. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today to learn a little bit about incident response. We're going to have a lot of information in today's webinar, both technical and really kind of business and workflow related, and all of those are important aspects into how you respond to an incident. I'm Mike Kaufman. I'm the VP of our Managed Infrastructure and Cloud Services group, MIX, we call ourselves. Hey, I started life as a network engineer, worn a lot of hats through managed services, through cloud services, and ended up here, working closely with the other guys on the call to help lead our operations and to lead our security practice. With that said, as each of them, step in to present some information, they'll introduce themselves to you as well. So today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about first steps. We have a slide that really kind of covers some steps that require pre-incident preparation, common errors to avoid, what your incident response team should look like, what communications management should look like during an incident. What do you do in terms of recovery? How do you execute that recovery, and how do you plan and make sure that you're ready to take those steps very efficiently and quickly during an incident, or at the tail end of an incident? What do you need to do around documentation? And then just kind of a recap of some of the important things that we covered today. So I'm going to jump right in and talk about kind of the critical first 48 hours. One of the things that we can happen is that you're working, or maybe you come in on a Monday morning and you have a couple of folks who've reported like, hey, something's not quite right. Our application isn't running the way we expected, or I got this weird email from one of our partners suggesting that they got some stuff from us that they didn't expect, any of those types of things. And so the first thing to do really is, hey, can I figure out what's immediately impacted, and can I disconnect it? Can I remove it from the network? So securing the network is kind of the first thing. Sometimes this involves actually removing network connectivity. Sometimes this involves disconnecting Wi-Fi, but securing your network, identifying the systems, and then kind of removing them. And then conversely, making sure that anything that you don't think has been impacted is also protected from that which has. If you think that you're in a situation where your customers or maybe critical data has been impacted, you probably want to get in touch with legal counsel. In case you have reporting obligations, if the word breach is used, you may have compliance and reporting obligations under state law. Those are things that you want to be aware of as you kind of communicate about your ongoing cybersecurity incident. You want to make sure that you have a good team together, and we'll talk about the makeup of this team a little bit later in the presentation. But you want to make sure that the folks who you've kind of pre-assigned some roles to are ready to go, and then you want to activate a predefined response plan, and we'll be talking a lot about those response plans today. So I'll take a step back before we move on to additional steps. We as a group put together today's presentation not as the deepest technical dive into incident response, and not as a completely soft skill or workflow or business process related presentation. But really what we did was we took two of the known frameworks or the known standards for incident response. Call it a blueprint, call it a floor plan, whatever you want, for executing response to an incident. One of those is NIST, that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. One of those is SANS, which is sysadmin, audit, network, and security. Each of those frameworks, they're very similar in terms of scope and what they cover. The steps or phases are enumerated a little differently, but they all kind of consist of a preparation phase, a detection and analysis phase, and then some steps to contain, eradicate, recover. We'll talk about those in depth here in a minute. And then what do you do, once the incident's over? We didn't really present today's information either as a formal adherence to either one of those. We kind of took them, we interpreted them, and we're presenting them in a way that we think is valuable to you. So again, if you're looking for a super deep technical dive, that's really not what our content is targeted at today. This is kind of a holistic view of how you prepare and how you handle an incident. So with that said, I'll move to the next slide here, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those technical steps. And maybe I'll turn it over to Jesse here to talk about scope and impact.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Jesse Thomas. I'm a managed consultant here with Action, the data center and security solutions architect. Is more than just a mouthful for our lovely MC today. But what I really do is if you make the wise decision to partner with Action on your cybersecurity journey, I will be the guy that comes in and tailors our solution to your business. Make sure that you are getting the absolute best cybersecurity solution for your company. So moving back to our content, step 5 in the incident response plan that we've outlined here is to assess the scope and impact. Generally, the importance of a incident response plan is to make sure that you have it in place before the incident occurs. There have been some instances where we have helped our customers recover from incidents without an active plan, and it certainly makes it a little more difficult to get all of your ducks in a row to try and come in after the fact and put in an incident response plan. So maybe step 0 missing from the slide is actually have an incident response plan in place, which makes it easier to make sure that these steps are completed when they come up. So when you're assessing the scope and impact, you're going to want to have some technological controls in place that do some logging and collecting of logs. So you can do some simple correlations. You're going to want to try to narrow it down to a time when the incident first started to occur, and then look for anomalous things that happened at the same time to correlate that activity. And usually having something called a scene would assist with that, because you can start putting all of those various disparate technological indicators into a single case and start painting out the picture of what really occurred and where your risks are, which will assist you quite a bit in your next couple of steps, because knowing where your problem is occurring will definitely stop you from wasted effort in trying to fix problems that aren't there. Generally, from a cybersecurity perspective, the best practice is to assume compromise, especially in an incident. So if you don't have any sort of monitoring in place to indicate that an area has been compromised, the default incident response is going to be to assume that it is compromised, which could lead to a lot of wasted effort and time, and basically double checking and making sure that certain areas aren't compromised. And if they're not, then you just eating into your time that you're going to need, especially as a business, for both eradication and recovery. Going to hand this over to our CTO, Craig Spleski, to talk a little bit more in depth about the eradication and recovery process, and do what he can tell us there.
Thanks, Jesse. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm Craig Spleski. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Action Associates. To expand a little bit upon eradication and recovery. So, we talk about eradication of removing of unauthorized programs, malicious artifacts, vulnerabilities, and this is really going to depend on step 5, assessing the scope. What actually happened? What was the root cause of the problem? What methodology or malicious activity was used to put you in the situation that you're in at the current moment? And that can be something very simple from a simple keystroke logger or malware piece that most antivirus and zero trust software can isolate and remove, to larger scale problems of ransomware that is going to be a little bit more difficult, because those generally tend to clean up after themselves to remove any traces of the applications that were used. So the very first thing that we would normally talk about in eradication is running a full system scan and analysis with the baseline endpoint security software that you have installed. It may also include us deploying a zero trust type application that really operates at a whole different level within the system by restricting what is actually allowed to run it at a given time, what's allowed to communicate. And in those particular instances, that provides us with a scope into the environment as to whether or not there's actually still malicious software present within the environment. So the eradication piece is definitely something that has to be done as part of the incident response. However, what I would generally caution is the one thing that you do need to do during eradication and identification of that is to try to preserve as much of the information that you have available to you. Now, in the circumstance of a ransomware hit, generally you're going to want to preserve some of the files that were encrypted, as well as there's always a telltale signature of this, which is a README file that occurs in every single folder that was impacted by this, with instructions on how to contact the threat actors to negotiate getting a key. I would also encourage, never do this on your own, never try to engage, but that's a job really for your cybersecurity company. So that being said, is that you want to try to preserve that information in an offline fashion, either to a USB drive or some other secured location, because typically a forensics team that may come in behind this is going to want to have access to that information. So do try to preserve as much as possible during the eradication phase. Recovery itself is going to depend again on the resiliency of your backups, how well those were hidden and managed from the actual threat actors as well. And then more importantly is, do you have the adequate resources to be able to restore rapidly and preserve what's there? So when I say that, and just as a quick example of this, if you have a server infrastructure and your servers were hit, and those servers may need to be preserved for forensics identification and evidence, to be able to restore your data to something, you're going to need to have a backup of that server. So these are all things that have to be planned for. So typically a forensics team is going to want to have an image of that system so that they can analyze it and take a look to see if they can find how that vectored in. To make a backup of that usually requires copying the files off to a external drive, and depending on the amount of data that you have, I would almost tell you that it typically is almost a terabyte a day, or a day per terabyte, I should say. So if you have 4 terabyte, of data that may have been impacted, it may take up to 4 days to actually produce a recoverable instance. But there are some other steps that can be done with that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. So for that, I'll go ahead and turn that back over to I think Mike or
Sure.
Yep, for lessons learned in communication.
Yeah. Thanks, Craig, and thank you, Jesse. So lessons learned in communication. Every one of the frameworks has an important aspect of continuing improvement to it. Evaluating events over the past period of time, evaluating certainly the events that led to a cybersecurity incident, finding maybe previously unidentified risk areas or weaknesses in network security, updating both the response plan, updating a report to leadership as to, hey, here's how this happened to our organization. And a key piece here, is really updating security measures overall. So today's webinar is really focused on incident response. If you had the opportunity to attend our previous webinar, it was really about protective measures. How do you prevent yourself from getting into the situation, or how do you minimize the chances that you'll end up here? And this phase 8 of incident response is really an opportunity to look at the measures you put in place and determine, are they adequate to protect us in the future? And I think one of the overarching themes of what we'll be talking about all day today through the presentation is incident response happens both before and after an actual event. It's very important to have, as Jesse mentioned earlier, the incident response plan put in place. We're about to talk about several other things that require pre-planning in order to be able to effectively respond when something happens to your network, to your data, to one of your cloud systems. How well are you positioned, and what decisions have kind of been pre-made or already made that allow you to act quickly without having to go through a long logic chain to get to the right answer. So that this phase 8 is both the final stage and kind of the first stage of your next phase of incident response, as you prepare a better response plan, as you prepare a better security posture to help minimize the impact of another attempt to get at your data and to get at your infrastructure. So strategic response steps, and these are things that I think are really should be in place on the day that something happens. And cyber insurance coverage, we talked about it in our previous webinar, but I want to talk a little bit about it again. If your business doesn't have a cyber policy today, I think we as a group believe that it should be a high priority. In the past, the backup and disaster recovery plan was sort of your protection of last resort. In this case, cyber policy, cyber insurance coverage is really a way to protect your business further. If something that happens compromises one of your customers, one of your vendors or partners in a way that generates liability for your organization, you're going to need some protection there. You're going to want to have some protection. And not only do you want to have a policy, but you or your IT solutions provider should be pretty clear on what's needed to stay compliant to the policy. If you run Office 365 without some of the security protections like multi-factor authentication in place, if you run without a good endpoint protection or managed detection and response solution, if you don't have a next generation firewall in place to protect your network, if you don't take any of these precautions, it's going to be difficult to both obtain a policy. No one's going to insure a network that has a lot of weakness, demonstrated weakness, or to be compliant to the policy. So these insurance companies will send out a questionnaire, every year. Are you taking these measures to protect your network and your data? And if you say yes, then they say, okay, we can continue covering you. But it's important to actually do the things that they're requiring. Or when you make a claim, they might deny the claim. And even worse, if you provide inaccurate answers to those questionnaires and obtain coverage that way, in extreme cases, it's possible that could be perceived by the insurance company as fraud. We've seen in the industry, not within our customer set, but we've seen within the industry where insurance companies have come back and sued a claimant or accused them of fraud or taken back a payout on a policy because of inaccuracies there. So something to be very aware of as you look at cybersecurity insurance. And then, hey, I'll leave maybe turn this over to Jesse or Craig to talk about secure communication channels and documentation.
Yeah, before I jump over to that, I just want to add a little bit to what Mike was saying there. Like, cybersecurity insurance is definitely going to be a partner with you, just like, you know, whoever your IT provider or cybersecurity provider is going to be. They're going to be your best friend. Um, you know, think of it as a step -1 in front of the step 0 of creating an incident response plan. You want to make sure that you have cyber insurance, because they're, you know, hopefully you'll never need them, but when you do need them, you're going to realize you couldn't have lived without them. And so make sure that you take the very first step of getting your cyber security insurance set up. So when you are in an incident, though, you do definitely want to have your communication channels available to you. Generally, that's taking a step back. You're going to want to hop off of Teams or Slack or whatever you use to message with each other, and, you know, pick up the phone and actually speak to people. It's usually the best way to establish communication. It's a little old school, but everyone should have a phone these days. You know, most of us can't go 5 minutes without looking at it. Mine's sitting right here in front of me. So make sure you have the phone numbers of who needs to be contacted available to you in your incident response plan, and that those phone numbers are updated. As you know, every once in a while you might find a better deal from a different provider, might end up changing your phone number, or if you move or something like that. Make sure that incident response plan has those communication channels updated as frequently as possible. And probably jumping ahead here, but, you know, you're going to want to test your incident response plan with like a tabletop exercise. So make sure that those numbers actually work when you do that. Once you've gone through enough of your incident response to confirm that other channels are secure, you can go back to, you know, email or Teams or Slack or whatever form of communication you normally do, which enables you to probably execute a little bit more quickly and in a more modern fashion. But that the first secure communication channel that you want to establish is phone numbers. We have a list that's printed out and taped to our data center. You know, you want to go old school, you want to go analog, you don't want to trust anything. I mean, cyber criminals get paid to do this. They're pretty clever. They have lots of free time. I mean, this is their job. They're going to go in. If you have an Excel document with a list of numbers and names on it, they'll go in and change the phone number. And, you know, you think you're calling Bill and you're getting, you know, criminal number 1 masquerading as Bill. And that's just going to make the whole situation worse. So, you know,
and you know, I'll add to that, Jesse. Yes, I'll add to that as well. You know, you want to make sure that you're communicating outside of any visibility of the threat actors, because you don't want to be telegraphing your your countermeasures to them as well.
Exactly, which is why I say go old school, go offline as much as possible, because, you know, if you're going into Teams and you're saying, all right, I've double checked this, you know, they're like, well, that's clear for me to go back in there and, you know, do bad things again. So old school, offline as much as possible. You know, even better than telephone is if if you're one of those people that still goes to an office and you talk to someone face to face. That's the most secure. It's very hard to spoof that. You know, Mission Impossible, Mask, and stuff like that aren't really part of modern cybercrime, but you know, it's usually the most secure way to communicate. As far as documentation, every engineer's favorite thing to do, I say it very sarcastically, but you definitely want to keep a paper trail, not only for your own sake, but for that, you know, critical step of lessons learned. You can review what you did, and sometimes you'll make, you know, even with the best laid out plan, you'll make missteps. You'll take, you know, a wrong turn. You'll go down the wrong rabbit hole. Things happen. But having that documentation in place allows oversight, review, and really allows you to improve your process. Hopefully you'll never have another incident, but it's not really the world we live in. Having that that ability to learn from the mistakes that you make, as well as having a good laid out picture of how the incident occurred, will definitely help improve your future security posture, as well as your incident responses in the future.
So, and one other item here, one of the big pieces of incident response is making sure that all of the folks that are impacted understand enough about what's going on to reduce the, what's going on communications. You want to protect the team that's working to resolve the issue as much as possible, and you want to, soothe the concerns or fears or uncertainty that your teammates, your staff, your partners, your customers, vendors may have because of whatever unexpected response or lack of response they're getting to normal business processes. So holding statements really, are things along the lines of we have been made aware that an incident has occurred in our primary location, or to the email addresses and accounts of certain distinct members of our team, or whatever the scope is that you've identified as early as possible. We've been made aware that a potential cybersecurity incident is in process. Investigation is underway as we work to restore functionality. These services may be impacted. Your email may not work, or you may not have access to your ERP, to Sage or Fax or CSD or whatever the case might be during this period of time. More information will be forthcoming. You want to have a few of those, ready to go, so that no one has to write them and figure it out at the time of, the incident. And again, it just speaks to the importance of the people side of this. We talked early on in the presentation about the fact that we'd be covering some business and workflow concepts as well as technological concepts. Managing that communication is really important. Holding statements are a big part of that. So what do you want to avoid when you're managing a cyber incident? One of the things that you want to do is confirm that it is in fact an incident before you make a notification, right? So just don't make assumptions based on evidence. It's okay to approach with the I think we're compromised, but don't necessarily execute every step of the plan until you've confirmed that you actually have you have an incident on your hands. So avoid premature notifications. It's a balance, right? Making sure that you're managing the expectations of your stakeholders and your partners as to why something may not be working. You definitely want to get information out there as needed, but don't do it before you've confirmed that you have an actual incident in process. Public statements. Hey, not every one of our customers, would need to put a public statement out, depending upon their size or their reach within their community or region. But some do. So approaching those with caution, being transparent without being overly communicative is really important. But being really as discreet as possible. I guess being transparent and then providing the information that's needed is the key. But don't over communicate.
Right.
In
and
terms
you don't
of
want to accidentally put out a statement that you have to walk back later either. So it's best to when you're making the public statements, to just communicate as little as you can and as much as you are certain of. You definitely don't want to.
What is known and not what is speculation. You never want to speculate. So that's good. That's a good insight, Jesse. Craig earlier talked about the ransom note that is accompanies many of the ransomware incidents, or pretty much all the ransomware incidents. As a victim, you never want to engage with the threat actors directly. Don't, pull out your credit card or rush out to purchase Bitcoin. There are a number of reasons why you might not do that. In many cases, the threat actors themselves have been labeled as a terrorist organization, or any ransom that you pay them could be interpreted as supporting terrorism or crime in some ways. You really want to leave the communication with the threat actors to cybersecurity professionals and law enforcement. So,
also for your own sake, I mean, generally, if it's your data that's being held, by someone for ransom, you're going to have more of a emotional attachment to it than a third party coming in to negotiate on your behalf. So the threat actor is going to have more leverage over you than they would over anyone you would have come in to negotiate on your behalf.
And we've seen, in our experience that that the initial asking ransom isn't always the end ransom. If it does have to be paid, we've seen where clever threat actors have figured out ways to encrypt the backups as well as the production systems, and that organizations have very little recourse but to figure out how to pay the ransom. Having a strong negotiator on your behalf could be very beneficial. Don't destroy evidence, and this is key. And we'll speak to this a little bit later. Craig touched on it earlier about having to maybe offload the encrypted files, the ransom note, some of the other things that might be used as evidence. We've seen also that sometimes the systems themselves may be claimed for evidence, maybe even for a short period of time. That puts an interesting challenge in front of those folks who are doing recovery from backups, potentially, if the backups are good, but you need a target to replace. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But don't destroy evidence, and then make sure, as Jesse talked about earlier, you're doing that documentation of all the steps, and importantly, some of the criteria that you're using to make decisions on how to approach one particular challenge or another. So all of those are important mistakes to avoid. Building your response team, and these roles really should be identified early in the incident response planning process. This should be part of that before the incident response, as we're calling it. Each of these roles should be pretty well defined. You should know who's kind of leading the technical efforts, who is going to help you in terms of what is your position with the insurance company, what is your position with any type of legal obligations that you might have as a result of what's happened, who can guide you to help minimize your liability and your risk in kind of the business sense. So having that person identified and looped in from the beginning is an important piece. Those communications, the holding statements, the management of any kind of public statements, or outbound communication to your staff, to your partners, to your vendors, that you'll need someone to handle that. And it's not necessarily that you have a communications manager title 24/7, 365 in your organization, but during the incident response, someone needs to be tasked with being in charge of communications, and that's what this role is all about. You'll need leadership looped in, so that in the event that a big spend needs to be made, or you need to pull in some other team members to help get through the events that are occurring, or you may even need to make some decisions about new hires or subcontract or engagement of experts. An executive sponsor is a key member of the team to have as well. And then external specialists. In a lot of these events, there'll be the insurance company themselves will appoint an external forensic response team to help you and to help your IT either your internal IT team or your IT partner really dig in and do some of those scope identification of path. How did this happen? Data that's so critical to making sure you close those gaps, you close those holes, and figure out how this happened. So a lot of times those teams will be they'll be partnered with your insurance company. They'll come in, they'll help provide these services, in alignment with your IT solutions provider or your internal IT team to make sure that you get everything identified that you need identified, and you're able to move past the incident. So the communication protocol, that communicator role that we talked about, communications manager role that we talked about on the previous slide, these are the types of communications that will need to be made. Internal updates, letting your staff know what's going on. Here's where we are. Here's when you can expect to re-engage with certain systems. Here's what you should be doing in the interim to stay productive. Or, hey, in some cases we've seen, the systems are down. We're not able to perform work today. I've seen it to where folks have sent folks home for the afternoon, while the event is managed. What are we telling customers during this time period if we're not able to be as responsive to their needs, if we can't get orders processed or invoices out or payments made? Do we have any legal requirements to make a public statement or to report to some type of regulatory authority or agency? Do we need to make sure that what has happened is clear in the media? And what are we doing in terms of making sure that we're documenting? And we've got a little bit more of a deep dive on documentation later, but I think some of the things that we've found and heard from participants in our webinars as most valuable are the stories of that we've encountered. And so we've got a couple of real world incidents to cover with you today, just to give you some insight into how these things happen, and then what actions were taken to help identify and then move past the incident. So I may turn this over to Craig and to Jesse to talk a little bit about how these two incidents were handled.
Thanks, Mike. So the very first kind of example that we have was a incident response for a business email compromise. In this particular case, a individual at the company had been fallen for a phishing email, which was, by the way, these are extremely, extremely well generated and well crafted. They are intended to try to trick you into basically giving up your credentials. So his email account was taken over at Office 365. And the account was, a number of things actually happen when that occurs, and it happens very, very quickly. Rules are created, and then exfiltration of data usually begins, so they can start looking at communications that that person may have that are influential, specifically something that may be of benefit for them to be able to send additional phishing out to other customers, other vendors that may, looking for some type of monetary gain from that. So in this particular instance, they had targeted one of their largest customers that really accounted for a significant percentage of their revenue. That customer identified it as a phishing attempt and knew that it came from a real account at this particular other organization. Their security officer immediately cut off all communications for email from that organization. So as email accounted for the largest percentage of their ability to be able to process orders, now they had to roll back to either phone calls or fax to be able to send this in. So it throttled back their ability to be able to create new order requests from this. Now, during that time, as we were made aware of it, we went in, identified the account that was taken over, and there's a series of things that happen right out of the gate on this. One is disabling of the login of the account, killing all sessions that may be connected to it, removing any authorized applications out of it, identifying any rule sets that were created or generated and removing those, and then preserving any logging information so we can determine when and where the account was taken over, and then also try to determine the extent and scope of damage of emails that were sent out from that account as that person. So the rules are generally created in a way that the individual really isn't aware that the account was taken over. They don't see any of the replies back from customers saying, is this really legitimate? Did you really send this? Those because they're usually replies to the original email, and there's a cleverly crafted filter that will remove those out of the inbox and put them into a shared location that the threat actor now has access to be able to monitor. So in this particular case, the outcome was that we restored the business relationship, and the email system was secured and monitored. We actually were able to get them to sign on with additional anti-phishing capabilities, as well as employee educational options that had micro trainings that they could take routinely and be able to hopefully identify these things happening. So the end result, though, was that it was an extended period of time that they were in this throttled mode of communication with this customer of theirs. And the end result was that the customer really demanded that a full forensics audit be conducted, which was took time to actually conduct at a large expense as well. So that was just an example of, while their internal systems were not compromised, their outside email was, and it created quite a bit of disruption, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it was a single email address that was compromised, sent enough concerning information to a big partner with this organization to have the organization basically throttle their business to phone orders only. And it was extremely impactful in terms of both business loss and in terms of the expense of the external audit. So that it goes to show now the incident response piece of this was the scope was identified, the scripts were run, the rules were removed and eradicated, documentation was created, and the post incident follow-up was to ensure both that all of the steps taken were documented, that the forensic audit results were documented, that the security posture was improved, lessons learned, and those items are what caused that business relationship to resume. So we've got another incident to relay to you around a ransomware attack.
Yeah, and I guess I can go ahead and take this as well. So in this particular case, this was an actual full ransomware hit on an internal network. So the initial incident response, once we determined that it was actually a ransomware issue, we were able to, obviously engage. We put our team together. We engaged with the customer, advised them to contact their legal, their insurance, cybersecurity insurance, and then really proceeded to lock the network down as quickly as possible. We, shutting down all workstations, leaving the servers intact as they were because we needed to gather evidence off of them, locking down their edge security, their firewall, stopping all, closing all VPN tunnels, closing any port forwards that may have been open for intended business purposes, and then evaluated the payment information, determining the backups were, so basically we had determined that the backups were insufficient for recovery. That's a situation that you never really want to find yourself in, is that, not only your servers have been encrypted, but your on-prem backups have been encrypted as well. And, or the offsite backups are insufficient or were so outdated due to one reason or another, either not being monitored or in some circumstances, depending on the backup solution being used, there are some backup solutions out there that do enable the threat actors to remotely delete the offsite backups as well. So in this particular case, that's exactly what had happened, which is unfortunate. So the outcome was we were able to restore to an older version, but in the meantime, a ransom payment was actually made by cybersecurity insurance with support from them. And then we were able to actually decrypt the machines, the system decrypting those machines and put them back into production. The end result was that it was about approximately 2 weeks of downtime for that organization to be able to get back to that point. So again, not the situation you ever want to find yourself in with not only your primary workloads, but your backups and offsite backups being compromised as well.
And not to tell on our clients that we've helped with this before, but I think in both of these incidents, there weren't pre-established incident response plans. So they could have had much better outcomes with those plans in place, and with those steps predefined would have been hopefully less impactful for their businesses in both instances.
I'd say that's absolutely true, and probably our overarching message today is that a lot of incident response happens before the incident. So recovery procedures, talking a little bit about this, I'd say there are some important things here in terms of what systems need to come up first. Craig talked earlier about when you're dealing with large amounts of data, the fastest networks can still present a timing challenge determining on how big the data sets are that you're working with. It can take a long time for data to transfer from one place to another, even across very speedy backbones. So part of the things that need to be, or I guess some of the items that need to be predetermined here are, if your production systems are locked down for a number of days while the evidence is recovered from them, and you need business operations up now, even if you have a good backup, where are you going to restore that backup to? Which systems are the ones that are most important to get up first? Do you have a redundant set of equipment that you could use? Do you have a prior generation set of equipment that you might use temporarily that can present a whole new and other set of challenges, but it can be, a safe harbor in a storm, I guess. Have you considered moving any of those business operations to the cloud in the past? Is this a time to make that determination? Are you close to a refresh opportunity? Do you just go ahead and say, hey, let's buy the next generation of infrastructure now and move operations, restore our backups to that while the other equipment or infrastructure is tied up in evidence collection or whatever the case might be. So all those decisions, should probably be in place and kind of indicate that this plan isn't, one and done, set in stone. But as your equipment ages, as your decision points approach, updating your incident response plan to reflect the realities of your infrastructure situation is really important. So where are you going to restore from? Where are you going to restore to? What are you doing to maintain business continuity while those processes are going on? How much work can you actually do in between, backup and recovery? And then, when you define your plan, what does success look like for your organization? If your servers were taken completely down, and you've engaged an incident response, you've got all hands on deck working to get past it. At the end of it, you turn back and look over the last 24, 48, 72 hours. What constitutes a successful response for your business? It's different for everyone to that type of incident versus what should generate a lot of focus or impetus in terms of improvement in your resiliency and your ability to respond to those types of incidents. And we've talked a good bit about documentation. Keep your chronological log, document the steps that are taken by all of your team members, external and internal. Talk about why you made the decisions that you made. Keep any evidence that you need to keep. Some other items that I might add to this are try to do this in real time as best you can. reconstructing events after the fact, especially in a hectic, kind of stress-filled situation like that. Recall may not be accurate or as accurate as you'd like. And ideally, the record that you create here is auditable. That you've added enough detail, and you've added enough information that it could be used to support compliance or some kind of legal investigation in the future. So, hey, I mean, we're really just kind of to recap, the things that we've talked about. You want to call your IT provider. If it's us, we'd be happy to help. If it's your standard resources, you have internal IT, you have another solutions provider, the minute you think something's wrong, get in touch with your IT solutions provider. Contact your lawyers and your insurance folks. Make sure that you're protecting the business from the business side as well as the technology side. And that's really kind of a recap of the key things. Identify what's happened, contain as quickly as possible, segregate or isolate the systems that to be impacted, protect the systems that you believe to be secure, and then get everybody to work on cleaning up, ripping out, denying access, and getting things back in order. Finally, recovering from the incident, making sure that everyone understands as much as they need to about what happened, about how well you managed it, about what the ongoing business impacts will be. We've seen it to be the case, like we had to go 3 days back, so we'll have to re-enter, transactions from the last 24, 48 hours, whatever the case might be. Make sure that your communication is very clear on that. And then, of course, in every case, you want to take away, what you can learn from the incident, and make sure that, you're using what you've learned to improve both, your protection against future incursions or incidents or problems, and what you can do in the event of a future incursion, incident, or problem. So both, you want to shore up both of those things with the experience that you have, and getting some of that knowledge imparted to you through a solutions provider, or through your IT, support mechanisms, gives you a head start. But there's always things that you're going to learn through an incident. So Craig would tell you that while you can really get to, it's difficult to get to zero risk. There's always going to be the chance that you have, a security incident. Having that response plan in place, having your protections in place, invaluable. Preparing on the front end to avoid and to know what to do when it happens, and preparing on the back end to be able to execute those decisions that you thought out in a non-stressful situation during the time of stress. That's key, because Craig will tell you, you do not want to go through this if it's possibly something that you can avoid.
Going through it with a very well formulated plan is your best outcome. Going through it with zero plan is weeks of sleepless nights. It is not an enjoyable situation to be in. Like Mike said, having the security plan, having the best cybersecurity options in place to protect yourself, still never a guarantee. And I always tell everybody in every organization I ever work with on this, you can have the best protections in place in the world. Really, you have to plan on it getting in. And what's your plan once it does?
So, I kind of want to conclude, and I want to talk a little bit about what we can do. And I know we ran up close to time. This happens to us every time. We really can't help ourselves. We enjoy sharing the information that we have with you. Hey, have your response plan in place. Make sure you're educating your employees on, what not to click on, or, how to avoid falling for the very well engineered attacks of threat actors. Make sure you have MFA in place. Make sure that you have a good, managed detection and response solution in place. The simple endpoint protection, it allows for more risk than things that are actively managed and monitored. And back up your data regularly and store it securely offsite. Hugely important. I do want to talk a little bit about our upcoming Cyber Defense Summit. It is in Chicago, February 10th of 2025. We've got a QR code on screen right now that you can use to register. We're going to have some panel discussions. We're going to have some industry, vendor speakers. We're going to have some internal case studies. It's going to be a great event, and we hope that you'll consider joining us here in February. And finally, how can Action help? We've got a lot of expertise and a lot of services that we offer in this area. We'd love to help you put that incident response plan together, or your information security policies. And we have a lot of security products and services that can, as we said earlier, help you avoid, in large part, a lot of this. So email security and managed detection and response, and training for your employees, and secure backup and disaster recovery. You should have MFA on everything that you can have MFA on. And making sure that you've got protections in place around the edge of your network, firewalls, DNS security, making sure that you're tracking the steps that you're taking, governance, risk, and compliance, and then making sure that you're not running outdated, vulnerable software on your machines. So, hey, I'd highly encourage you to get in touch with us. If you have questions about how to get started, we'd love to be there to assist.
Absolutely, that's what we're here for. I know our audience are all very educated and very knowledgeable in cybersecurity, but some of you guys work with some folks that hear ransomware and think to themselves, well, where did he run? So make sure you reach out to us. It's never too early to start planning your cybersecurity incident response plan. So that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. All right. So, hey, I know I didn't leave a whole lot of time for questions, but did we get any questions?
We got one, and we also did get a comment. Craig and Jesse, your guys' ties are killing it today. So,
not normal apparel on a usual day. So
they got all fancy for you all today. But all right, let's roll into our one question so that we can get everybody off to the rest of their day. Pushing it to the slide area now. We're a growing company and don't have a dedicated IT resource. How often should we be updating our incident response plan?
Well,
so the easy answer is whenever anything changes, but that's not always practical. So it's good to have a cadence. I would recommend at least quarterly. Monthly is better, but quarterly is probably the bare minimum that you should look at, as far as you don't necessarily need to update it, but at least review it. And if something has changed, that's when you need to update it.
Perfect. All right, well, I think that's about all the time we have right now. But if anybody is to have any other questions, after the webinar, after everything's kind of digested, because these guys are so knowledgeable and they give you all the information. Oh, we might have had one come in. Let's see. No. Okay. So anyways, sorry. A lot of information going up. And Keith, I see your question. We have a lot more webinars coming on. In the same section that I was talking about, your free pack of cybersecurity stickers is also our other related content. This would be anything from construction, distribution, any webinar that's going on, as well as anything going on with our mixed division. So check those out. I want to thank these gentlemen for taking their time and, giving their information to us today. And we want to thank everybody for coming out and joining us. Your account managers will be in touch soon. So if you were to have any questions, like I was mentioning earlier, they'll be happy to answer that. But you're also welcome to reach out to Mike Kaufman or info@action.com. We will get you in contact with the right people, and we'll make sure that everything's filled out. With that being said, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great rest of your week, and thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Mars. Thanks everyone for participating. Really appreciate it.